Hey everyone, welcome back to the second video where we were going to go over making the wings for the Keeze bat. So in order to do that, I'm going to start out by coming over here to the subtool dropdown, and we're going to make what's called a second subtool. And what that basically is like a separate layer. You can look at it like if you have an understanding of Photoshop or any layer-based program. It's a way to isolate an entirely different model but keep it in the same Z tool in Zbrush. In order to get that, we'll start with a box or a cube, if you will. I'm going to go to Append, come over here to Cube 3D, and then you'll notice that it put this giant cube in place of our Keeze bat head. And what we want to do is click on this PM3D cube right here, and now that is the active subtool. Like if I were to come over here and hit move, this is the thing that's going to move now, right? But if I go back over here, this is the other, we're going to move our bat head. So we have the way of isolating different subtools, which is super powerful, and also ZBrush is magical in that you can have the same amount of subdivision levels per subtool. So I can crank this to 8 or 9 or whatever subdivisions or whatever my computer is capable of, and then I can do the same thing on this one, and I can do the same thing on this one for 10 subtools. So it's super awesome. So what we're going to do, these obviously don't look like wings. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to squash it in the Z direction. Okay, I'm going to go like, make sure that you're grabbing that blue guy, not the green one. And then we're going to scale it in the X direction. And one thing to keep in mind too, when you close and reopen your ZTL, um, you actually lose your snapped camera view, which is kind of lame because there's two different file types you can save within ZBrush. You can save as ETL, or you can save as zproj. And at zprojes, I find that if they get to a certain file size, they start to fall apart and they get buggy and they don't open. And I haven't had that issue with ZTools as much. The problem is you don't retain any of the history that you've done in your project window up here, like your cameras, any settings you've changed up here to your lights or any of that stuff. You don't retain any of those changes, which I find is kind of it's a worthy trade off in my opinion to not have your file get corrupted. And maybe that's been rectified over the years, but I've had it get me too many times to count. So I usually just save the Z tool over here. You click save as, and now they have a save finally, and a save next, which will automatically version up your file. So that's how I like to go about it. And anyway, so let's keep shaping these wings, and then I'm going to do a see-through because I do have my concept up right here, and I'm going to recreate that camera angle so we can snap it into place. So document, and then this time I'm just going to choose front. It doesn't really matter which one of these you choose. Okay, so we're going to move our cube up and scale out to fit those wings. Cool. All right, and so the way we're going to do this is we're going to actually paint a mask and then extract that into geometry, and I'll show you how that works. If I hit, let's turn off see-through. If I hit Shift F for polyframe, you can see the polygons. We're gonna come over here to geometry, and we're gonna make this a Dynamesh, so we get a bunch of nice little polygons to work with, which is just exactly what we want. I just moved it for no reason, so I'm going to snap it back to where it was. Go to see-through, and then you'll notice, similar to how you hit Shift and it switches to the Move brush, you can also hit Control, and it gives you a mask pen. If you hold down Control, it gives you these mask options. And so you can do mask lasso, mask pen, mask circle. You can do all these different masks. And for now, we're just going to go with we're going to do the mask pen. Go to see through a little bit. And if you control left click, you're holding control, you'll start to turn off your polyframe. You'll start to mask the wing. And what did we do again? We forgot to turn on symmetry, right? So hit X and then start holding control and left clicking to paint your mask. So come in here and then fill it in. And now if you want to do the inverse of the mask, you just hold Control Alt left click and it'll do an inverse. Get that nice and pretty. And sometimes if you have another subtool visible, it interacts weirdly with the subtool that's active, and it drives me crazy. But if you hit solo, it'll make that go away so that you can continue that mask over a little bit. And it just makes the other subtools inactive and not visible. It doesn't delete them or anything. So Control Alt does the inverse of the mask. You'll use a lot of masking in ZBrush. Cool. Now, I want to sharpen these lines a little bit. So if you come over here to masking, you have these options right here, and you can, you can grow your mask, you can shrink. What I like to do is blur like once, and then go to sharpen, and it'll sort of smooth out those lines. And our poly count isn't super high on the cube. That's why we're seeing some of that weirdness. But that should be good for what we're doing right now. We've got the masks drawn out. Now we're going to turn this mask into Geo by going to extract. And right now, this thickness number is kind of arbitrary too. You'll have to noodle with this a little bit. I'm going to rotate so we can see how thick it is when we do the extraction. Turned it to perspective mode by hitting P. And then I'm going to just hit extract and see what happens. Cool. That's not too bad. Now, if I were to come into my viewport and navigate around, oops, it disappears. And so what you have to do is hit extract again, and then you have to choose accept. And when you choose accept, it actually makes a separate subtool with those wings in it. And they're still masked. And we don't want those to be masked because we want to be able to work on them. Because if we were to go in and sculpt, it doesn't sculpt in the dark areas. It only sculpts in the light areas because it's masked out. So in order to clear that, we just hit Control left click drag, just like you're running a Dynamesh basically. And then it'll clear that. So we don't like these hard edges, so I'm going to do a general smooth. And then I'm going to re-Dynamesh this and hit Shift F just to see what our poly count's looking like. Okay, so it stayed basically the same. And now we're in Dynamesh mode. Cool, let's see what it looks like without solo on. And we can come in here and just delete this guy. We don't need it anymore. So PM3D cube, delete, okay, and it's gone. So now we have wings. Problem is what? They're way too flat. So we need to give them some dimension. So I'm going to switch over to my snake hook tool, skip this note. I'm going to scale up my draw size a good amount, and then I'm going to kind of pull these back a little. And then it gives it some nice dimension. Still smoothing, trying to get some of these wibbly wobblies out of there. Re-Dynameshing. And by smoothing, we lost some of our point detail. So I'm going to come over here, make sure my snake hook is on. And I'm just going to scale down my point size and draw those back out and sharpen those a little bit. Cool. All right, so we've got some nice wings. I'm going to save. Next. I love that they've added that button. It only took them 14 years, but it's there. Okay, now let's switch back to our camera mode, camera view, and then do a see-through and see what we're missing. So it looks like our proportions are a little bit off. I'm not like being too much of a stickler about it because I feel like we should have that control in 3D to kind of make it what we want. But for these, close, I guess. All right, so we've got to add these arms now. The arms and like the fingers that come out. And the way that we can do that is I'm going to go to clade build up. And sometimes it's tricky when you're working on a thin mesh. That looks great, but when I come over here, sometimes it'll pull it through this other side. I think this is thick enough that we don't have to worry about it though. But a way to get around that, let's try a bigger brush. Oh, see, it worked that time. So the way to get around this when working on a thin mesh is undo that, undo these for now, and then come over here to brush and over to auto masking, scroll down, turn on back face mask. And then when we go like this, it no longer affects the backside on a thin geo. Little pro tip for y'all. So let's keep sculpting this guy out. A little elbow joint. Come up here. These are basically going to be like the hands. I'm going to up my Dynamesh resolution just a smidgen. Started doing whey protein during my workouts, and I think I'm just a little bit intolerant of it. So that's why I have to clear my throat every 5 seconds. I know that's probably annoying. All right, let's go in here and let's do the masking for the rest of this, just for kicks. So I have my mask pen on, again, holding control and then left clicking and drawing. I can come out here and draw these fingers that come out. Control Alt to use the inverse. And let's do it on this side too, just for kicks. Rotate around. Yes, we only have to worry about this side for now. Cool. And this last one. Awesome. Over to masking, and we'll blur and then sharpen. And so that's how we'll do this. So in order to get this to work, I think I'm going to inflate these out. I'm going to fix this guy real quick. I don't like that. Okay, so invert the selection by control left clicking. All right, so now the white is the active. And we're going to inflate these instead of having to like pop those out manually. So if I come over to the deformation drop down, there's an inflate. I use inflate all the time. I love this. So if you just slowly drag it over, you'll see those inflate out like that. And then we have these fingers kind of popping out. Sweet. I'm going to re-Dynamesh, and then there's obviously some cleanup to do. So if you wanted to, if you didn't like these super sharp edges that came out, you can go all the way back and then blur your mask a little bit and then try and inflate. Maybe it didn't work. Yeah, it was worth a shot. So one way to sharpen your mask too, just in the viewport, is you can hold Control Alt left click and it'll sharpen, and then Control click will blur. So instead of having to go over to your drop down, your mask drop down, you can just do it that way if you'd like. So Control Alt sharpens, Control Alt left click sharpens, and then Control click smooths, blurs, if you will. Kind of digging the skinnier ones, but all right. So I'm going to invert the mask, re-inflate, and then I'm just going to have to go in and you can leave the mask on and hit smooth and start smoothing, and that'll work too. Yeah, that works better. Cool. Go back to clay buildup, clean some of this up. Re-Dynamesh. Sweet. losing that claw. Some weirdness on this side, but we can clean that up with the smooth. One of the things that's really cool too is if you find that your smooth, even though its intensity is all the way up, just isn't smoothing like you'd like, and the higher poly your mesh is, the more likely that is to happen, that your smooth just doesn't work very well. It's not super intense. So one of the awesome things that they've done is they've given us, if we come over here to Lightbox Tools, and it loads up all the scary stuff. We go over to the brush menu, and then there's all these presets that they've already given us. Like pretty much every brush has multiple presets that you can download. So if I click into the smooth folder and go over here to smooth stronger, this will be the new default smooth. And and that just does what the name implies. It just smooths everything a little more intensely. And so you got to be careful with this a little bit, but if your mesh is really high poly, you can use that and it'll work better. I tend to use it pretty much all the time. We need more polys to work with. We're starting to see some faceting. So I'm going to go up to 300-ish and then redynamesh, get some more in there. Give this guy a little bit more of like a joint, a bone joint, some better anatomy. Sorry if you hear my kids screaming. That's just what they do. And then I'm going to go to the Damien standard brush and kind of carve this stuff in a little bit better. One of the things too, if you're going to 3D print this, is when you print it at scale, at small scale, these details are just not going to come through as much. So in the 3D, when you're pushed it this close on like a 4K screen, it obviously looks pretty intense. But a lot of that detail just doesn't show up in the prints, even with a really high resolution printer because it's so small. So keep that in mind as you're sculpting. You almost have to sculpt uh, overly intense if you're going to a printer so that you can actually see those details after the print, depending on the scale that you print it at. If you print it really small, you're going to want to push those details even more. So I'm just coming in here too and just adding some stretchiness to the skin. So we all know that the bat skin is usually really, really skinny, flexible. That's probably not pushing through to the other side as much, so we're going to have to go over here. I'm going to do that on this side too. So pushing the details and smoothing back. Cool. Lost our point up here. One of my favorite brushes too. If you come over here to the brush palette, uh, if you hit P, it'll bring up all the P named brushes, and then go to pinch. This is one of my favorite brushes. You can just start pinching stuff and sharpening points. Lucille 2, just add those points. I love the pinch brush so much. In fact, we can do that with this other one as well. And a real quick way to switch between subtools, which I like to use, I'm not sure if I covered it in the last video, is if you alt left click on the subtools, you can switch between them in the viewport easily. So I'm going to use the snake hook to clean up this. This ear is just a little bit too rounded. I'm going to add a little bit more interest. So scale down my brush size and add the points. Cool. So now we've got our wing, and I know the wing is a little bit inflated, a little bit too thick, possibly, but we actually like that. Again, for a 3D printer, we don't want to have geo that's too thin because sometimes that can create errors in the print. Some printers, I mean, I have the Elegoo Saturn S and the Saturn II, and those are both really good with printing super thin stuff. I've actually been really surprised. I mean, they can print stuff that's paper thin. Um, but we'll keep this a little bit thicker just to be safe because I don't know what printers everyone's using. So kind of refining some of these wrinkles. I think my kids are gonna murder each other. Sorry. Nice. Okay, cool. Okay, so now let's say we can't send these to the printer separately. They've got to be one geo. It's got to maintain topological continuity. And I know that that was a fun word to hear, but what I mean by that is just everything's combined. So we don't have like this separated edge right here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to come up here to the head and click on that, go down to merge, and then merge down. Undoable. It's not undoable. Everything's undoable. Don't worry about it. Hit OK. And now these are in the same subtool. And keep in mind too, if your subtools are real high poly, this could cause a problem as they're combined, or it could just take some time. But still, the topology isn't actually combined; they're still separate, which is one thing that's cool about Zbrush is these poly groups, right? And so now I have all these different colors on this poly wireframe, and what that means is these are isolated into their own groups, so you can still isolate those to work on, which is really cool. What I'm going to do is come to poly groups down here in the tool palette, and then hit auto groups. And what that does is that everything that's the same topology or its own topology is going to be isolated in its own groups. Now this wing is over here, the body's right here, this wing's over here, and but that was just to show, how cool polygroups are and how to isolate stuff. We want this to be one geo. So now if I right click and run a Dynamesh, so right click drag, you'll see that now it's combined geo. So again, to get those combined, we have to merge everything into the same subtool and then come over here to Dynamesh, make sure Dynamesh is on and active, orange, and then left click, control left click drag to Dynamesh, and it'll combine everything together magically. Sweet. And let's see where we are. I'm sure we've gotten off of the concept a little, but that's fine. Okay, sweet. So let's go through, and I think I'm going to actually refine this eye area a little bit using our mask technique. And so with the mask pen on, holding control, left clicking, I'm going to grab all this stuff. I think I'm just going to inflate out the eyelids just a little bit more, because right now it still just feels like it's all on a sphere because this character is just a sphere. Not very good design, if you ask me, Nintendo. But it is what it is. Okay, so Control Alt left clicking is inverting the mask. Oops. It's really easy to inadvertently smooth your mask too by control, like tapping. Um, just be aware of that. Okay, so that's good enough. And I'm gonna blur my mask by control left clicking a little bit, and then control Alt left click will sharpen. Okay, I'm gonna blur it a little bit, and then invert it. Clean this up just a little. And then I'm gonna come down to deformation and do my favorite, inflate, and pop that eyelid out just a little. And leave it masked, and then go over and smooth things a little. Cool. And then I'm going to re-Dynamesh all of this again. And come in here and just kind of work out some of the details. You know, maybe this eyelid's going to have like some cracking. You know, he's a senior. Nice. Fine. I'm going to reshape this forehead just a smidge. Around her. I'm using my snake hook tool and I'm scaling up my brush size a good amount. And then I want this to be sharper. So I'm going to go to my H polish brush and go along that edge and just sharpen it out. Clean that guy up a little. And again in the ear, using my Damien Standard, clean up some of this edge. Add more resolution to work with. Crank this up to 550. Oops. Sometimes it takes a second. This is getting to be rather high poly, but I kind of need those polygons to be able to sculpt these details. And obviously this detailing is kind of dependent on the resolution your printer can print in. You know, if it's a lower end printer, it's not going to be able to get these details, but it's nice to have them anyway. It's nice to practice. So turn off symmetry with X because we don't like symmetry down the middle line, right? That looks weird. Smooth out some of these contacts. And cool. Get the ear a little bit. So you're looking pretty basic. Damien Standard, they kind of run a crease right here. Using the standard brush, add like a little bit of a fold. Cool, now I'm getting a little bit nitpicky on this guy. I'm gonna clean up some of this inner eye stuff using the polish brush. Damien Standard, turn down the intensity. Actually gonna add just one deal right there. Back symmetry on. Turn it along that. I'm using the Damien Standard and I'm popping out right now so that it's pulling out that crease. And we're still seeing a little bit of faceting in the eye, so I'm going to do just a general smooth to kind of get rid of that, those polygons. Cool. And then I'm going to shape this eye a little better. Awesome. I think that's good for this video. So please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know how I'm doing. Because like I said, this is my first day. I'm new to this shenanigans. So give me your feedback. Let me know how I'm doing. And in the next video, I'm going to go through some more refining of the details and then ultimately getting it prepped for a 3D printer. So I'll see you in the next video.